Hello, folks, and welcome to the first edition of Crypto Livewire. This is going to be a live streamed YouTube series for you guys that we're going to do at market close every Monday and Thursday going forward. And we're going to use this video time to do some of our macro overviews as well as general thoughts on the market. Whereas we're going to save the more actionable stuff and trade ideas and stuff that we do specifically for the CryptX premium service. So if you want a free trial of that for 2 weeks, make sure you check out stickytrades.com/CryptX. But I'm excited because we got a lot to talk about today with Bitcoin potentially at a turning point here, finding a recent local low. Also, Qs were up over 2% today. So a lot of bullish price action around the board. But Monty, welcome. Anything you'd like to say to the audience as we begin here?
Yeah, just very excited to be joining you guys on this Monday market close. Like CJ said, plenty to talk about today, so we'll try and cram as much info we can into this half hour. But thank you all so much for joining. Like CJ said, this is our inaugural CryptX live wire. We're going to be doing these every Monday and Thursday. And also, we're forming a Telegram group where we'll be posting actionable trade insights, updates, news, and a whole lot more. So we'll post the link for that for you guys to join and get signed up so you don't miss any of our insights. But without further ado, I think we can dive into things. CJ, is there anything you'd like to start off with?
Yeah, I want to start with the Bitcoin weekly chart, but back to that Telegram idea that you had mentioned. We actually did have some sample posts in there this weekend. So we will show you kind of an example of what that looks like and what you can expect as a member of CryptX Premium. So with that being said, let's check out Bitcoin on the weekly chart. So going along the theme of a checklist, right? There's a couple different things that I look for, and I think Monty looks for as well when it comes to the weekly checklist on Bitcoin, specifically in regards to the bull market being over. And one of those checklist components has to do with the 50-week moving average. Every time throughout Bitcoin's history, when we had a sure close below the 50-week moving average, price has gone into a bear market, and that has been kind of the confirmation, like here's a good example, here's a good example. The downtrend already starts, but that's really the confirmation is a weekly close below the 50-week moving average. And we flirted with that a little bit last week, but Bitcoin was able to come around and has actually held support. Like you see, we dipped through it for a little bit there, but now previous resistance at 100,000 is flipping as new support, at least so far. And something interesting that we can note is that while the Stochh is not fully overextended yet, the CCI is lower than places where we've seen previous local lows in this bull market. So the CCI is beginning to pivot higher, and I think there is some interesting bullish signals going on as so long as Bitcoin can hold above that 50-week moving average. Second thing, and this goes more towards the macro trend and broader cycle, but one thing that I really like to look for and kind of approach to the market that I have is I always want to be thinking from somewhat of a contrarian perspective, unless the trend is extraordinarily strong. There's a fine line between being contrarian and being reckless. But something along that contrarian theme that we have here is Bitcoin's net unrealized profit and loss. And the Bitcoin network, one of the cool things that we can measure is we can look at wallets that accumulated coins and whether or not those coins are now in profit or unrealized losses. So continuing with that contrarian theme from a macro perspective, we want to be fading the market when this yellow line, that's the net unrealized profit and loss. So that's indicative that, when we're at these overextended levels, the vast majority of market participants are in unrealized profit. And we want to be accumulating and dollar cost averaging when the majority of market participants have a significant amount of unrealized losses. Right. So looking from a cyclical point of view, Bitcoin, it has hit a pretty overextended level in terms of net unrealized profit and loss. So something to keep in mind. This isn't necessarily a huge warning sign yet, but we are definitely closer to the vast majority of market participants being in profit as opposed to being in loss, where we saw historically has been really optimal times to accumulate Bitcoin. But overall, things are looking, decently strong right now. So, with that kind of macro overview out of the way, Monty, would you like to add anything to that? And then I know there's some specific assets you'd like to talk about as well.
Yeah, CJ, great analysis. Thank you for that. The one thing I did want to just briefly touch on is Bitcoin dominance. We talked about this on Friday, but I think it's something that's definitely worth noting. This upward sloping trend line is remaining intact. Bitcoin today is kind of leveling out after seeing a lot of positive price action in the altcoins, particularly some coins that we'll talk about later in the show, like Zcash and Monero, some privacy related tokens. But we haven't broken below this level yet. And I expect to see sort of a bounce from this level and Bitcoin dominance to go higher. So what that would mean for Bitcoin, like CJ said, we have this really nice level of support at around 100K. Whenever I have a nice level of support below price, I'm much more comfortable setting a long trade because you have a clear stop loss at about 98.40 right below these wicks here. Because even though this was bearish volume here, it was still a lot of volume and a lot of supply absorption occurring at that level. That kind of sets the stage for, this being a place where price will bounce from. And I like what we're seeing so far from Bitcoin. And you can extrapolate that all the way back to June and even further in the beginning of June. You can see that this level has historically been acting as resistance. Each time we've tested it, we've bounced from that level and gone up to make close to local highs. So I think Bitcoin, especially with the RSI turning up, crossing above the midline, the CCI hinging up above the midline, it looks like Bitcoin is poised to make a pretty nice move here. So in agreement with you, CJ, I think that, I think Bitcoin's going to lead the charge. That's just based on my Bitcoin dominance chart. But one thing I did want to take a look at as well is ETH, because ETH, although it is technically an altcoin, it does trade more in tandem with Bitcoin than some of the other assets. And ETH has been trading in this really nice channel. And I want to see it move back up to the upside of this channel. This is something I talked about on Friday, something I posted in the Telegram group as well, that I was taking a long position in ETH just up to about 38.50 is where I want to get out, because we are, as you can see, this level has been support. Like AJ always talks about, that flips it to resistance. And now we have resistance at 38.64. So I like ETH to make that move up to there. Again, you got the RSI hinging up, the CCI hinging up. We had a lot of volume today already. And if this flips green, I think that could be a very positive sign for ETH. But overall, one other thing I did want to mention was the DXY. The DXY, I know you might be scratching your head wondering why I'm talking about this one.
I love the DXY.
Yeah, you gotta look at the DXY. It's one of the first things I look at when I'm kind of deciding if I'm going to be going long or going short. And right now, with the DSI breaking below the midline in the RSI, breaking below the midline in the CCI, I could see a slight pullback in the DXY. And what that typically means for Bitcoin is we see capital flowing out of the dollar and into Bitcoin. So if that does happen, they're kind of looking inverse right now. I think we could see a nice little pump and positive price action from Bitcoin, perhaps up to this 114, 115 level before seeing some resistance. So that's kind of what I'm seeing right now, CJ. But I would love to get your thoughts on some more assets as well.
Yeah, it's nice to see when you have clear setups when it comes to that 7-point trading checklist. I love that you brought up the DXY, because that's going to be potentially one of my favorite assets for 2026, because it's been going up already with stocks, which is very, very interesting. If you look at, I mentioned before, the Qs closed up 2% today. In the inverse correlation idea, the DXY should be down at least 30 to 50 basis points on a move like that. But it's actually flat and still remaining a little bit resilient above the 20-day moving average. So definitely keep an eye on the DXY, because I'm looking to definitely buy potential dips in that one, but it's not set up for a long trade just yet. And as you mentioned, Monty, another technical thing to look for is when the CCI crosses that zero line. Typically, like let's say what it's doing in Bitcoin right now, where it's coming above the zero line, typically that's an indication that you're going to have 1 to 2 more days of momentum in the direction of where the cross is coming from, right? So all pretty good stuff. I saw that the charts didn't come up for my unrealized P&L. So next time, yeah, just, yell or say something, stop me. But I just want to show that real quickly because
yeah, of course.
So yeah, this is basically what I was drawing on. So as you can see, this yellow line is net unrealized profit and loss. And where we are right now, you could think of it as kind of a cycle oscillator, where when we're at the top, we want to be looking to take profit. When we're deeply oversold, we want to be looking for accumulation opportunities. Right now, we're kind of higher range, upper range. So just a little cautionary aspect, going this late into the cycle. But I still do think it could be, based on today's price action and a lot of what we've seen, maybe we have another month here or two of bullish price action. But I think, Bitcoin in the last month has been about 3 for 3 in terms of bullish trades on the 7-point trading checklist. I will never say like, oh, I'm 3 for 3 on my Bitcoin trades. But what I would say is that it's not me, it's the trading checklist. But if you were to have looked at that the last 3 instances, it has worked, but price has been it's lost momentum and has not been able to flip the 20-day moving average to new support. It's still been resistance. So that's another critical level that I would look for, is the 20-day moving average, really flipping from previous resistance into new support. So with that being said, I know you wanted to talk about Zcash and some other stuff. You want to go into that?
Yeah, before I do, though, I actually saw a question here from Dan. That's a good one. And something I wanted to talk about today is BTBT. Had a good day yesterday. Not looking so hot today, but still worth talking about. So let's take a look at BTBT, see what we're seeing from a technical perspective. Obviously, we got a big red candle today. I'm not very encouraged by what I'm seeing from the RSI and the CCI. We have this hinge up right here where it's starting to move back towards the zero line. If we get a cross above this moving average, like right when these 2 points intersect, all it would take is 1 day of bullish price action tomorrow, and we could see this break above this moving average and start trending up towards the 100 point. But for the meantime, this is still resistance, and the same goes for this. So until you see a break above the moving average on the RSI and the CCI, I think we could see some continued negative price action, regardless of what Bitcoin does in the interim. So this is one that it does mirror Bitcoin in some ways, but also because of the trading vehicles that are used to trade it, like options, it does tend to kind of have a mind of its own and do its own thing. So BTBT, I'm not advising any action right now. I would be patient with this one. I would wait until we get a crossover in either the CCI or the RSI or both, and use that as confirmation to enter your trade.
I like that Dan brings that up as well. We should make an oscillator instead of the altcoin index or Bitcoin dominance, where instead of comparing Bitcoin to the altcoins, it's actually comparing Bitcoin to like the largest 50 crypto equities or things like that. That would be an interesting thing to see in the market, because along that point of BTBT being soft today, Cypher mining and IBIT have also been down quite a bit. And I think there's actually an interesting opportunity when you look at assets like that. We were talking about those on Friday because they had gone up 10x, both of them since April, which is like parabolic moves must be sold. That's one rule I always have for myself. And so I think puts on those are very interesting in terms of, if like I'm long Bitcoin futures, but I also am long some puts on IBIT and Cypher mining, because I think that's an interesting like pairs trade, because those two are already coming off they've been rejected from Fibonacci extension levels. So that could be an interesting hedge where both of those trades end up working, even though they're different directions. And if the market sells off, a lot and the Bitcoin position gets stopped out, then the Cypher and IBIT positions will make up for any of those losses. So I think that's an interesting hedge, and I'm giving a little bit too much away, but
Well,
since it's our first episode, I want want to give you guys a good amount.
Yeah. And on that note, CJ, it's a common misconception that if you see Bitcoin going up, all the crypto related equities are going to follow. That historically has not been the case. They trade on their own, they do their own thing. And I agree. I think the best use for a lot of these assets, even things like Mara and Riot, are great hedging vehicles for being long Bitcoin, because you can see those moves down. Even a slight move down in Bitcoin can result in a big, large drop in a stock like Mara or Riot, or like you talked about with Iron. I know you've been looking at that one really closely, and that chart has been pretty ridiculous. And like you said, tough to buy in from a perspective like this thing's going to go higher. But looking at the puts on those, CJ, would you mind kind of sharing your charts and taking a look at those two miners?
Yeah. So, I mean, the implied volatility on these is 120, but the realized volatility is also 120. So, from a volatility perspective, even though it's high, those options are not necessarily expensive or overpriced. So, that was one of the key hangups that I had about shorting it via options, but it's actually, they're not really super expensive. Anyways, let me bring up my chart again, because it's important to check those out. I mean, buying this stuff here is just like, if I was thinking to myself, like, it's dumb. Like, anyways, but we have that's the weekly chart. I guess we could start with that. So this is Cypher mining. As you can see, we started at about $2 in April, and we just closed below 19 or below 20 after topping out at about 24. Have the CCI pivoting lower on the weekly chart, which is that a big indication of weakness. Then when we go to the daily chart, it's a little bit late from the 7-point trading checklist. Obviously, I would have liked to get in on, Thursday or Friday, but better late than never, right? I still think this one is a pretty decent setup. Let me take away the 50-day moving average, because we don't need that. But we now have a close below the 20-day, which is, the Jim Rohrbach method. Let's remember, above the 20-day, typically bullish; below the 20-day, a severe warning sign for the bulls. And something that's really important about markets that goes beyond technical analysis and more into like feel is relative strength and relative weakness. So on a day where the Qs, risk assets, and Bitcoin are up pretty decently, and then you see Cypher and Iron and Zcash closing red, the fact that they can't even rally while Bitcoin is rallying is a severe red flag and shows that there is significant relative weakness. So, couple bearish candles. I think this thing's going to break down. Iron is in a very similar position. Looking at those fib extension levels, we have hit the critical 2.618 level, which historically, a lot of Bitcoin cycles, we will see assets peak at either this 2.618 level or even the 3.618 level. So something to watch for when it comes to those fib levels. And then Zcash as well, we might as well hit it real quickly, because I did look to take a short in that one earlier today. Another one, just ridiculous moves from 40 to 700 in roughly 2 months. So I remember Jim Cramer always used to say this. It's kind of funny, but parabolic moves must be sold. And those are parabolic moves that are now starting to show weakness and will likely exhibit mean reversion within the next 2 to 3 months at the bare minimum. So that's pretty much all I got today. Unless you guys have any other questions, we'd be happy to answer. But Monty, any thoughts on that, and any additions you'd like to talk about?
Just in addition to the Zcash trade, another coin that's been pumping, and we've been talking about it. It's pulling back today, but still worth mentioning, and that's XMR Monero. This one has had a very good couple weeks here, climbing pretty significantly up to about the 383 level, pulling back today. But I still think this has room to go higher. And one thing that is somewhat encouraging is this massive bullish volume candle here. This came at the top of the uptrend. we put the trade idea out all the way back here, and the goal was to take profit at 421. That target got hit. I got out. But that being said, if we do get a bounce off this level here in the RSI and a continued climb higher, I think that this thing can continue to run. We're right at critical resistance here, where we previously saw the swing high reach 422.60 all the way back in May. We're back at that point, and a break above that level could lead to some very parabolic price action. So I think this one's worth watching closely. I would set an alert for about 424. And if it breaks above that level, I'd be considering longing this one with caution. So XMR, one to keep on your radar for sure, because it's close to breaking into recent highs. And if it does, I think we could see a move similar to Zcash. But I see we got some more questions coming in, CJ.
Yeah, let's hit XRP and then we'll wrap
Okay.
unless you'd like to share anything else. But yeah, XRP, I mean, we have some other comments. I see MSTR and BMNR. But yeah, XRP, I could pull up the chart, but I want to speak on it right now. I mean, it had the trading checklist set up with Bitcoin, created a nice bullish harami over the weekend. AJ was actually texting me about it. He likes XRP a lot from the fundamental case. And so that's definitely something to watch. As for my process and entering new trades, I can't chase something when it's already up, 8 to 10%. I'm not necessarily a momentum trader these days. I am more centered around mean reversion because that's what the 7-point checklist really is. And that's how it's been able to, get that 70 to 80% hit rate over time. So at this point, the checklist, it's just not set up for me to chase at this level. But if I was in a trade from those earlier levels, I'd probably still hold it and ride it out until either one or two, let's call it 2 to 3 of the items on that 7-point trading checklist. Once they reverse to the opposite direction, that's my, I guess you would say, a more objective or quantifiable exit point. So 2 to 3 of those 7-point checklists flip, then I'm out. But as of now, looks pretty good. I hope you caught it earlier. But yeah, that's so nice. I appreciate that, man. But any thoughts on MSTR and just kind of some of the relative weakness we've seen in crypto equities before we wrap up?
Yeah, definitely worth mentioning. It's been a rough couple weeks for a lot of the crypto related equities, specifically the miners like Riot Mara, but also ones that have just been accumulating Bitcoin like MSTR. So seeing weakness here, one thing that is encouraging is that this level is holding here. This is the critical level I wanted to see held, 236. We did dip below that, but we briefly popped back up and are above that level. Now, this is one that I wouldn't feel too comfortable going long on. It's almost the opposite of what we were talking about earlier, where this is a critical level. A breakdown below this level could see a very dramatic drop in price. And because of that reason, I don't necessarily want to be a buyer of MSTR right now. But on the flip side, Bitmine. So this one's really interesting because unlike MicroStrategy, they're not accumulating Bitcoin, they're accumulating ETH. And their goal is to accumulate 15% of ETH's total circulating supply. Right now, I think they hold about, 6.6% of ETH's total circulating supply. So a very similar business strategy to MicroStrategy, but they are doing it with ETH. And this is an interesting one because you don't even need to really look at the charts to decide if it's a good buy or not. You need to look at the outstanding amount of ETH, how much ETH is circulating currently, and then what 15% of that would be. So 15% of, the total market cap of ETH divided by the number of shares gives you a good idea of where that stock should be trading. So BMNR, if they can manage to accumulate more ETH, I think that'd be a very good move and also see some really nice gains in the interim because it's a innovative concept and right now their only competition really is Bitcoin miners and accumulators, and they're really kind of doing their own thing. So I think BMNR is worth keeping an eye on, because, like I said, it's pretty easy to apply fundamental analysis to a stock that discloses as much as they do.
Yeah, I think these digital asset treasury companies are going to be a very interesting case study for business school students and speculators down the road, because
Yeah.
we have I mean, this is like MicroStrategy is the definition of reflexivity. And it's like once it starts going down or going up, it's very difficult to turn it around because it's so dependent on that underlying. And MicroStrategy has been a great example of that. I think we might bounce and consolidate a little bit here, but I have a longer term target, a technical target of like $100 to $70 on MicroStrategy, and it's trading around 240 right now. That would be if it kind of copied the fractal that we saw in 2022. So maybe we get it, maybe not, but either way, beware of that reflexivity because it is very, very powerful. But other than that, Monty, if there's anything you'd like to leave us with, I'm good to go, my friend.
Yeah, I think that about does it for today. Thank you guys all so much for joining and for your questions. It really makes the time fly by. And don't forget, we'll be sending out a link to join the Telegram group. We'll be posting insights, news, and a whole lot more in there, so you don't want to miss it. And really, we're looking forward to launching this service, getting to know you guys, and answering your questions. So thank you so much for watching today. We'll see you again on Thursday. Have a great rest of your week. Talk soon.